Hello again YouTube and welcome back. For those of you who watched my previous video, I recently installed the Akebono brakes on my car. However, I had pointed out that these discs are really just in pretty bad shape. You can kind of see this sort of score here in the rotor face due to an old pad that must have been in place, as well as all these kind of heat spots on here. So these really are in pretty bad shape. Plus I'm not a big fan of the OEM pads that came on this. I can tell that they're supposed to be quiet pads and they're really just not biting the way I want them to. Plus I'm looking to get a little more performance out of my car. So I recently ordered some two-piece rotors and some yellow stuff pads that I'm gonna be going ahead and putting on the car here. So we'll go ahead and get these unboxed. It's gonna be a pretty quick video, just basically showing you guys how to install rotors and pads on a 370Z with the Akebono package. So let's go ahead and get started by unboxing the new rotors and pads. So here are the rotors and pads that I've decided to go for. For the rotors, I decided to go with a sprinkled face, mainly for the aesthetic, but it also acts very similar to a slotted rotor in that it has a nice kind of biting edge here to really dig into the pad and make sure that you get plenty of grip out of the pad and rotor combination. It also helps kind of clean the pads off, keeping the dust off of them and things. The main advantage, of course, of two-piece rotors is that you do lose quite a lot of weight. Between the four of these, I think you lose a total of 30 pounds according to Z1's website, and the weight loss is actually from rotational mass as well, which is a big factor here. So not only are you losing total weight overall in the vehicle, it's also rotational mass, and it's attached to the base of the spring here. The fact that you're taking some of that weight off of the actual wheel portion means that anytime like you hit a bump or anything, it's gonna be able to deflect a little bit easier and make the ride not only more comfortable, but also handle a little bit better because it's gonna be more stable under bumps. So really a great combination here. I'm excited to get these on the car. So we'll go ahead and get started. To make access to the pads on the front calipers easier, you'll want to turn the steering wheel to the direction that you're working on. So to get the actual pads out, we need to remove the two pins that hold the pads in place here. You'll have these little cotter pins that are right on the inside edge of the car. So you'll just kind of pull those out with a set of pliers. Sometimes they may not be accessible. They'll kind of be tucked away inside the rotor. And for that, all you need to do is take a Phillips screwdriver and you can actually rotate the pin towards you until you can get at it with the needle nose again and then pull that out. It's important that you hold on to these. You don't want to lose them. They are really important to making sure that the pins don't fall out on you while you're driving around, which could cause all sorts of problems with the brakes. So don't lose these. They're pretty easy to lose because of how small they are. But once you have those removed, all you need to do is press in the spring, and then you're supposed to be able to release the pins that are sitting on the outside. They may need some coaxing. So I'm going to see if I can kind of tap at it from the side here with that Phillips head. That kind of helps push it through. And then you can pull it out. You need to be applying pressure on the plate here. And then we'll do the same thing here. So just kind of push in so that way you can get the pin going through. And then once you've got that other pin out, this pressure plate is going to fall off. Just kind of set those aside for now. And with those plates removed, you should be able to see the pad and the rotor now. There's the rotor sitting there in the center, and then you have your two pads off to the left and right. The new pads that we are going to be putting on are going to be thicker because they are brand new. So you need to depress the cylinders back into the caliper a little bit. To do that, we are going to wedge a screwdriver or something in between the rotor and the pad here. I'm not going to be reusing my rotors, so I'm not worried about damaging the face. But if you are worried about possibly damaging your rotor and you plan to reuse it, there's also some good tools online. There's actual tools that are meant to be able to depress rotors like this. You can't use the typical tool that you get from AutoZone because this is a dual cylinder, or rather it has cylinders both on the inside and outside of the car here. So you do need a special tool to be able to do it for these calipers. Because I don't have that tool right now and I don't want to wait a couple of days to get it, I'm just going to use a flathead as well as a couple of other pieces of metal that I have laying around just to kind of separate these. So the way you would do this with a flathead is you kind of just squeeze the screwdriver in between the pad and the rotor, and then you can apply pressure onto the pads, just kind of using it as a wedge. And then if you can see there, I've already started forming a gap in between this pad and the rotor on that side. kind of do the same over here. This does, as I said, damage the surface of the pads pretty badly. You can kind of see the damage that I put there. So just keep that in mind. You won't be reusing your pads or rotors after this. So we just want to make sure that we get those pistons pushed in all the way. It looks like I have a little more room to go here, so I'll go ahead and get a thicker piece of metal that I can squeeze in here. You can see all 4 of those pistons on either side are pretty much flush with the actual frame of the caliper here. That's what you want to see when you're installing new pads, because now you have plenty of room in here to be able to slide the new pads in. So we'll go ahead and place the new pads in the caliper now. And actually, one thing before we install the pads, EBC didn't provide the shims for the fronts. They did for the rears, but we don't have any shims for the fronts here. So we need to take these shims off. Should be able to just kind of pick underneath this and then pull that shim off. The whole point of these shims is to kind of help reduce noise by giving you a different surface to place the pistons up against. It also helps prevent damage to the pad itself, because the pad is going to be a softer material. By applying the actual pressure to the back of this plate here, it kind of evens out where the pressure is being applied to the back of the pad. So you kind of want to maintain this, and so we'll just go ahead and install those onto the new pad here. You want to make sure to install them in the same way that they came off of your older pad. They pretty much only fit on here in one direction, so you can't really screw it up. And before we actually install these, I'm going to clean up the back of the shim a little bit, and then I'm also going to kind of spray some brake cleaner on the inside of the caliper here as well, because it is just completely filthy. Just try and clean it up a little bit so that these can operate a bit more smoothly. So I've gotten that cleaned up a little bit better now. It doesn't have to be perfect. There is still some dirt in here, but I was really just looking to clean this up a little bit. But now that that's been cleaned up, really you should be applying some grease now onto your calipers along the top and the bottom here, where the pad ends up sliding along, as well as along the pins here that the pads make contact with. This helps reduce the amount of noise in the brake system, allows it to operate a little bit more smoothly, and helps prevent rust. I don't have any grease on me right now, and I don't feel like going to the store. I know some of you guys will probably leave a comment on that. This is the one thing I would recommend you do differently. You really should be putting grease on your calipers, just kind of help everything operate a bit smoothly. But we'll go ahead and get the system installed now. We'll go ahead and reinstall our brake pads. So of course your side with the loops should be facing outward. These pads do not have a particular direction. They are symmetrical here. So go ahead and just kind of slide these in. It should slide in pretty smoothly if you've depressed your pistons all the way in. So there we go. Once you've got those pads reinstalled, we'll go ahead and reinstall the clips. You might need to fiddle with how far in the pads are pushed. So I need to pull mine out because they're not quite lined up with the holes properly. So just place the pressure plate back into place. Apply enough pressure so that you can slide the pin back over. All right. And then they are supposed to go, of course, all the way through to the other side. I kind of used a punch to sort of push the pins through just a little bit. You don't need to apply a whole lot of force, but those are now in. And then you need to rotate the pin until you can see the holes for the cotter pins along the side here. Don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there is the hole for that pin that I'm referring to. So you want to make sure that that's facing you. So that way you can slide those pins into place, which you should have kept from earlier. The flat face will of course go through the actual hole in the pin. There we go. Make sure that's pushed in all the way. And you'll go ahead and do that with both pins. So that completes the installation of the pads. Now, if you want to do your rotors like I'm going to do today, you need to actually remove the caliper by undoing the 2 bolts that are going to be sitting back here in the back holding on the caliper. I'm not going to detail this part. I'm just going to fast forward it because I just did this when I installed these new calipers. So I'll leave a link here in the top right corner of the screen that links to the installation of these. It shows you how to take calipers off of the car. So you basically need to remove them to be able to slide the rotor off of your hub, and then you just go ahead and place the new rotor back onto the car. One thing you will want to do before you reinstall the caliper though is you will want to give your rotors a good cleaning. Most of them will come with a protective oil on them. If you buy from like EBC, they usually have a black coating that helps kind of bed in the brakes. And you don't really need to clean those, but for most other rotors, you'll have this oil on it that helps mitigate the amount of rust while they're in storage. You want to make sure you clean that stuff off before you go for a drive. I've already cleaned this one, so we'll go ahead and reinstall the calipers, and we'll also do the passenger side as well.
The great thing about the Akebono brakes is once you know how to do one wheel, you pretty much know how to do all of them. For the passenger side, we're going to turn the steering wheel once again towards us to give a little bit more access to the clip that's on the back. We'll take that clip off, take the old pads out, and we will compress the pistons or the cylinders inside the caliper, install the new pads, take the caliper off, and install the new rotor, pretty much following the exact same instructions that we did for the driver's side. The rears are also exactly the same. They have the same clip, they're just a little bit smaller. The bolts on the back to remove the caliper are also a little bit more difficult to get to. You will end up needing to use a crescent wrench here. You can't use a socket because the space here is a little bit tight. Once again, if you are wanting some information or a more detailed how-to on removing these calipers, I am leaving a link, of course, in the top right corner as well as in the description, explaining how these calipers are installed, and it shows you just how to take these off so that you can put new rotors in. Now there is one subtle difference with the back, however, especially for installing aftermarket rotors like I am.
Alright guys, so I finally got the camera working now so I can show you a small problem that I ran into and how to fix it. So the parking brake shoes are too wide for the new rotors because these new rotors have like a thinner inner lip here for the parking brake. So you need to adjust it to get it to work properly and to be able to actually fit these rotors. To do that, this sort of silver cylinder here with the teeth on top of it, it's the adjusting knob to be able to tighten these in or out. If you adjust these top teeth forward, it'll bring them in and closer together, and that's what we want. And in order to move it freely, you should kind of push this spring out of the way because it's kind of butting up against the teeth here. But yeah, you should be able to just kind of adjust this, bring the shoes in properly, and then actually install the new rotor on the car.
You'll want to make these adjustments with the parking brake disengaged. For me, since my rotor is slightly smaller on the inside diameter, I am trying to pull the shoes in by rotating the top teeth towards the inside of the car. You'll want to make adjustments by about 1 tooth at a time, or about a 1/6 of a turn, until you get to the point where you can just barely slide the rotor onto the car without having to force it. And then what I found is rotating it 1 full extra turn, or about 6 teeth, will give you just enough space in between the shoes and the rotor with the parking brake disengaged, so when you pull on the parking brake itself, it feels like factory.
And that completes the installation of new rotors and pads for the 370Z or G37 equipped with the Akebono brake package. When you are adjusting those parking brakes in the rear, make sure that it's the same both for the driver and passenger side. That way when you engage the parking brake, it's engaging properly on both sides to make sure it holds the car in place. I am liking the look of these new rotors and pads versus the factory discs and pads that I had on there. Just looks so much nicer, but more importantly, the performance is just unmatched with any brake setup that I've ever had. The initial bite is spot on. There's pretty much no brake fade. I actually took these out to the Twisted Sisters a couple of weekends ago and was really able to push these almost to their limit, and they are just handling quite nicely. I really like them. I can also feel a difference in the handling as well from the extra 30 pounds of weight loss. The car's just a little bit more responsive all around. Really pleased with them. So if you are considering upgrading your brakes, maybe consider going 2-piece and with the yellow stuff pads for the 370Z. It is a little bit expensive for the upgrade, but in my opinion, it's really well worth it. But anyways, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I will be giving a more in-depth review of these brake rotors and pads in a later video, hopefully. So just stay tuned for that. And thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.